If you cut the wrong wire on a bomb, it explodes. But in Middle Eastern diplomacy, the bomb is actively rewiring itself while you hold the cutters, which is why today's submitted document is a rigorous policy analysis arguing that the newly signed U.S.-Iran Memorandum of Understanding is a dangerous appeasement that fails to secure American and allied interests. The material makes a strong case for the dangers of this agreement by highlighting the author's deep, undeniable expertise on the geopolitical landscape. But we really need to dive straight into the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we should start right off with the structure and flow of the piece. The 5-point standard for a successful agreement provides an excellent analytical framework, but its overall effectiveness is, well, it's diluted by structural fragmentation later in the text.
Right, because the author introduces this highly logical, really robust 5-point test early on to evaluate the deal.
Exactly. The pillars are clear. No nuclear development, no ballistic missile development, no funding of terrorism, a toll-free Strait of Hormuz, and subsequent economic relief.
It's such a great start.
It is, but the weakness is that the manuscript just sort of abandons this structured approach halfway through.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Instead of using those 5 pillars as the skeleton for the entire piece, the narrative spirals into this sequential topic hopping. We abruptly shift from a $300 billion reconstruction fund to J.D. Vance's media appearances, to, like, the Megyn Kelly controversy.
All the tonal shift there is...
Yeah, and then suddenly we're on to Israeli drone strikes. It causes the reader to just completely lose the core analytical thread.
That's clearly laid out. I wonder, though, if we've considered the reality of the news cycle. But doesn't the inclusion of the media drama and the timeline of Sunday's events show the real-world political chaos surrounding the deal?
Well, sure, it shows chaos.
Right, so if we force it all into a rigid 5-point list, do we lose the narrative momentum of how quickly this is unfolding?
I get that, but a disorganized subject matter requires an even more organized structural container to keep the reader anchored. You can still depict the chaos, just not chaotically.
Okay, so reorganize the entire piece strictly around those initial 5 pillars.
Exactly. Filter all the secondary evidence, the political drama, administration infighting, allied military reactions, strictly through those specific categories. Take the discussion about J.D. Vance and that $300 billion reconstruction fund.
The one funded by the Gulf Coast Coalition?
Yes, place that massive detail directly under the 5th pillar, economic relief and sanctions. It stops being a random piece of financial trivia and becomes hard, undeniable evidence.
Oh, wow, yeah. That concentrates the analytical firepower immensely.
Right? And you do the same with the military actions. Move the breakdown of Hezbollah's attacks on northern Israel and the subsequent strike in Beirut strictly under the 3rd pillar, no funding of terrorism.
So you're using the reality on the ground to prove how it contradicts the administration's rhetoric about, ending the war on all fronts.
Exactly. And you group the Iranian 13-point demands, like the release of $24 billion in frozen assets, right alongside the U.S. talking points within these pillars to create a direct contrast.
So taking something like tolling the Strait of Hormuz, which is Pillar 4, when you place the U.S. talking points on international waterways right next to Iran's demands, it turns a sprawling timeline into an airtight prosecution.
Absolutely. It makes the argument undeniable.
Let's look closely at the section discussing the desired endgame, because this structural container forces us to look at the historical context the author uses.
Oh, definitely. Leaning heavily on traditional historical analogies establishes a high-stakes environment, but it ultimately overlooks the nuances of the modern asymmetric warfare that the piece itself so accurately details.
Yeah, the argument frequently relies on these 20th century conventional war comparisons.
Right, like likening the MOU to the 1938 Munich appeasement.
Exactly. Comparing the Iranian regime to Nazi Germany and demanding this World War II-style unconditional surrender, it creates a massive disconnect.
That makes sense, but could the evidence also support a different conclusion? Like the fact that we are dealing with proxy terror groups today? Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis?
Right. The tolling of the Strait of Hormuz, global economic sanctions.
Exactly. These modern geopolitical realities require a vastly different strategic framework than traditional state-on-state warfare, which makes the World War II analogies feel slightly out of place and, honestly, less original.
It's a bit like diagnosing a complex cybersecurity breach, but then prescribing a medieval moat as the solution.
A medieval moat, exactly.
The diagnosis is incredibly modern and detailed, but the proposed cure belongs to a completely different era.
So the suggestion here is to ground the ultimate proposed solution in the specific asymmetrical realities detailed in the text, rather than relying solely on those conventional 20th century war comparisons.
So instead of simply stating the U.S. should demand unconditional surrender like in 1945, what should they do?
They should use the text's own points about Iran's proxy network to explain exactly how a modern defeat of this specific network would actually function, like without traditional ground troops.
Oh, I see. Flesh out the author's brief mention of crippling the state from above to cause an internal uprising.
Yes, that's the fresh, modern definition of victory we need. Explore what dismantling the IRGC's infrastructure actually looks like in 2026.
Or what freezing Qatari financial back channels looks like today. You starve the extremities to force a collapse at the center.
Exactly. Now moving on, let's talk about the domestic political commentary.
Okay, so what I really like about this part is the sheer amount of research into what all the different political players are saying right now.
The passion driving this geopolitical analysis is undeniable, for sure. Yet the tonal inconsistency between rigorous policy breakdown and ad hominem political commentary diminishes the overall authority of the work.
The whiplash is intense. I mean, the piece pairs deep factual analysis of Iranian military talking points and the IAEA and UN Security Council mechanisms with, well, sudden, jarring detours into media gossip.
Right, transitioning from discussions of Hitlerian evil and ballistic missile development to quoting social media complaints about Grandma Grouper.
Yeah, or who called whom low IQ, and all these debates about the woke right. It's just a massive tonal whiplash.
It really is. Is there a risk that focusing solely on the domestic media drama might overlook the existential threat the author established earlier?
Well, if we strip out the domestic political commentary, do we lose the context of why this deal is being rushed? I mean, the author seems to think domestic politics is the main driver.
I totally agree that the concept of domestic politics being the driver is relevant. It's just the vocabulary of internet drama that breaks the suspension of disbelief of the reader. You can't put Grandma Groper and IAEA protocols in the same thought.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So how do we fix it?
Elevate the political commentary by focusing strictly on policy signaling and removing the superficial media grievances. That maintains a tone of objective, high-stakes urgency throughout.
Okay, so concrete example. When discussing the vice president's media appearances, we remove the gossip about past insults or who is anti-Trump.
Exactly. Instead, focus solely on the signaling aspect. You argue that an administration utilizing hostile media platforms or disparate cutouts, like leaking through Axios, indicates a disorganized communication strategy.
And adversaries like the IRGC are actively exploiting that. That's a great angle.
Right? And you do the same with the internal political infighting. Frame the fact that the Secretary of State and CIA remain silent while the VP handles the press strictly as evidence of diplomatic vulnerability.
Not just domestic political theater. It shows a lack of consensus that foreign enemies can see.
Precisely. It translates internet gossip into serious geopolitical intelligence.
Well, that is incredibly actionable. Let's quickly recap the three main takeaways for the author. First, restructure the narrative completely around the 5-point standard for a good deal.
Second, update the historical analogies to match the modern, asymmetric warfare realities detailed in the text.
And finally, harmonize the tone by translating media gossip into serious geopolitical signaling.
I have to say, the author's deep familiarity with the subject matter and their passion for creating robust arguments is just really impressive.
It really is. We warmly invite the listener to implement these structural and tonal edits and submit the revised material back in for another critique. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.